This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
African leaders set to sign landmark trade deal at the African Union Summit. Sudan's military leader welcomes power sharing deal. And 14 migrant bodies recovered after dozens drowned off the Libyan coast. Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In business news, Egypt increases fuel prices to promote economic reform. And in your sports, South Africa into the quarter-finals of the Africa Cup of Nations with a stunning win over Egypt. We begin in Niger, where African leaders have gathered in Niamey for an African Union summit that will launch the operational phase of a long-sought continental free trade zone. The trade deal got a boost earlier this week when Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari committed to signing the deal this weekend. CGTN's Ramanyang is at the summit and filed this report.
Unlike some other continental-level agreements like the Yamoussoukro decision, which was designed to open up African skies, but pun not intended, didn't take off, the continental free trade area has come to life really fast, even by AU standards. It's literally taken the better part of a year and a half from the signing of the treaty to moving towards the operational phase of the agreement. Now, with Nigeria and Benin to sign the treaty on the 7th of July, the deal will effectively have 54 signatories, all but one country in Africa, and 26 of those have or will, like Gabon for instance, deposit the instruments of ratification. As home to Africa's biggest economy and its biggest population, Nigeria did take a bit of time to come around.
See that internal mobilization has already occurred, and this is a difference. And I think, in fact, the world should, or Africans should recognize and appreciate what happened, because it's still going to be signed within the time frame, specified, and with the full support of 200 million people saying, yes, we need it, and not like the president signed it as trying to impose it on them.
Agreeing to the treaty, however, is just the easy part. Now comes the hard-fought negotiations over tariffs, exclusions, and rules of origin.
One, we need to give time for the member states to liaise with the business people to sensitize them about the emerging opportunities in the market. And they also needed to produce trade documents and distribute them across the national territories. Then we're also going to call for a meeting of Director Generals of Customs to come and look at the state of preparedness. That's the first level. The second level is for us, as the African Continental Free Trade Area Interim Secretariat, to work with the regional economic communities to come up with a framework of collaboration, because the African territory is very, very big.
Now, the rules of origin threshold varies from one sector of goods to the next, but broadly speaking, an item needs to have at least 80% of its value added within the continent in order to qualify for preferential tariffs within the CFTA.
And we're now looking at what level of, by how much, in the simple person's terms, what percentage of the good should have been produced on the continent for us to sort of allow it to move around the continent. So we don't want, say, 90% of a good is produced in China and 10% is just a stamp that is done in Africa and then you sort of put it into the global African market. No. So there is a threshold of, it has to be 80, 85% that is done on the continent for us to be able to sort of take it forward and put it into the CFTA basket. At
least 7 different countries, including Kenya, Ethiopia, Eswatini, Senegal and Ghana, had also put in their bids, their offers to host the CFTA Secretariat. When I asked the Commissioner for Trade at the AU Commission if Ghana was agreed to as the host at the July 5th ministerial meeting, this was his response.
Announcement tomorrow. I don't know.
Albert Muchanga there, holding his cards close to his chest. Now, in the wake of the summit in Niamey, member states that will have ratified this will now be able to trade under CFTA rules by the 1st of July 2020. Beyond that, however, there's more. Negotiations on competition policy, that has to be done in 2020. And thereafter, talks on how to set up a continental customs union and a continental single market over the medium term. Ramanyang, CGTN, Niamey, Niger.
Sudan's Transitional Military Council and the Opposition Alliance are due to finalize a power-sharing deal on Monday. The two sides will establish a sovereign council, which will be the highest level of power in the country. The deal will see the two sides rotate control of this council for 3 years before holding elections.
The latest round of talks on who will lead Sudan has proven to be fruitful. The ruling Transitional Military Council and the opposition Freedom and Change Alliance have reached an agreement to share power. They will set up a joint sovereign council that will see power shift between the military and civilian leaders. General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, widely known as Hemeti, and who many see as the most powerful figure in Sudan, has welcomed the agreement.
The deal that we have been waiting for a long time has been finally agreed on, and this agreement needs unity and purity of intent.
The authority will be under a military leader for the first 21 months, before a civilian leader takes over for the final 18. The council will include 5 military figures and 5 civilians. There will also be a 6th so-called civilian member, who is reportedly a retired military officer. The military and the opposition resumed talks following a month-long hiatus. Relations broke down after a violent military crackdown occurred at a Khartoum protester camp in June. The two sides have agreed to establish an investigation into the events.
From this podium, we're saying that if we make a mistake, we will be held accountable. I swear, we will be held accountable. Every person should take up their rights. If any person does not take up their right, we will not advance. Dishonesty will not make us advance.
This joint authority is set to rule for 3 years. Once the transition period ends, elections are to be held, ushering in democratic rule. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Meanwhile, South Sudan's government is urging the East African community for more time to remit its dues. Each EAC member state is required to pay $8 million each year. South Sudan has fallen behind for several years now, accruing a total of at least $27 million. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports from the capital, Juba.
South Sudan's government blames the 6 years of civil war for its economic crisis. The lack of funds has made the country fail to pay its membership contribution in the East African community. Juba says it will pay the money.
There have been efforts to make sure that we do. And of late, the same 2019, we were able to pay $3 million. So at least by now we have paid $4 million.
That $4 million is the total amount of money South Sudan paid since it joined the East African community in 2016.
The EAC Treaty, Article 146, provides that a summit may suspend a member state from taking part in the activities of the community if it fails to observe and fulfill the fundamental principles and objectives of the treaty, including failure to meet financial commitments within a period of 18 months.
South Sudanese people in the capital, Juba, have been reacting to the news of South Sudan's inability to pay its contribution to the EAC.
The money that South Sudan is going to pay yearly to the regional bloc, how are we benefiting from that money? First of all, you will see that most of the things are being done, for example, in Arusha, Tanzania. Most of the things are being done in Kenya, and most of the things are being done in Kampala. So as South Sudanese, what are we getting from it, apart from saying that I am part of the East African community?
We enjoy the market, the common market within the East African community. I know there are challenges, specifically with South Sudan as a nation, because we are not contributing in terms of maybe taking goods from our country to the other countries. But I think with time we'll be able to do that.
South Sudan's government says upon completion of paying its contribution to the East African community, it would embark on sensitizing its population on the rights and obligations of being a member of the regional body, but that would further require funds, which the government says it doesn't have. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Tunisia's Coast Guard has recovered the bodies of 14 migrants who drowned when their boat sank. Tunisia's Red Crescent believes their boat was carrying more than 80 people when it set sail from neighboring Libya. Meanwhile, dozens of migrants who were saved from a shipwreck in the Mediterranean by an Italian aid ship have been taken to Lampedusa Island. They disembarked in the early hours of Sunday. Italian authorities have banned migrant rescue ships from entering the Italian port, but rescuers from the Mediterranean staff have gone against the decree. And moving to Libya now, authorities continue to call for an independent investigation into an airstrike on a migrant center in the outskirts of the capital, Tripoli. The toll from Tuesday's hit rose to 53 dead, with more than 130 injured, according to UN aid agencies. The organizations are pressing for the closure of all such facilities in the country as warring parties refuse to back down from a raging conflict. CGTN's Astatal reports.
The United Nations says they're still not able to verify who is responsible for this week's airstrike that hit a migrant detention center on the outskirts of Tripoli, even as the Libyan UN-backed government pointed fingers at a foreign nation.
There needs to be this independent investigation. What we can say is at this point there does need to be greater efforts, far greater efforts from the international community, particularly amongst those states that have leverage over the warring parties, to bring an end to the violence, to bring them together to the negotiating table and to establish a political dialogue that brings an end to these clashes.
Reiterating its appeal for the closure of such facilities in Libya, they say that the survivors of the ordeal remain severely traumatized. The Libyan government has also voiced readiness to close such migrant centers. Children are said to have been among the fatalities at the Taj Ura site.
53 migrants are confirmed dead, among them 6 children, following Tuesday's airstrike on the Tajura detention center. Over 130 people were injured. The more than 600 migrants detained at Tajura represented at least 17 different nationalities, mainly African.
Reiterate once again that the coordinates of these detention centers in Tripoli are well known to both sides of the conflict, and this was a preventable tragedy that never should have happened.
Reports that guards had fired on migrants trying to flee remain unverified. About 350 migrants are still sheltering at the center. The facility initially held approximately 600 people. According to authorities, 3,300 migrants and refugees are detained inside and around Tripoli. In addition to the Taj Ura tragedy, the International Organization for Migration also confirmed that more than 80 migrants are feared drowned after their boat capsized while trying to reach Europe from the Libyan port of Zuwara.
The survivors told IOM staff that the inflatable boat carrying 86 people, including 4 women and 2 children, left Zuwara around 6 a.m. on 1st of July. A few hours later, the boat began to leak and capsized due to the confusion and frantic movements of dozens of people on board.
So far this year, the UN Migration Agency has reported 426 people have drowned while attempting to reach Europe through the central Mediterranean route. About 3,750 have been returned to detention, where they remain at risk as clashes continue to rage in Libya's capital, Tripoli. Astatal, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Tunisia bans the full-face veil in public institutions, citing security reasons. And Iran is set to exceed uranium enrichment limit in 2015 nuclear deal.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Tunisian authorities say the state of emergency decreed in 2015 has once again been extended since the country still faces imminent terror threats. Tunisian Prime Minister Youssef Chahed on Friday banned the niqab in public institutions, citing security reasons. The Muslim face veil covers the entire face apart from the eyes and can potentially be used as a disguise or to escape justice. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi with the details.
Tunisian President Beji Caid Sibsi decided to extend the state of emergency by 1 month throughout the country. This decision was made after consultation with the Prime Minister and Speaker of the House of People's Representatives.
There was a disagreement between the government and some parliamentarians on the constitutionality of the state of emergency, but I took the decision.
The National Security Council approved the president's decision following 2 suicide attacks in downtown Tunis and after a wanted terrorist wearing an explosive belt was shot dead by police in a popular neighborhood. Authorities said ISIL terrorist cells, which operated in Tunis, had close ties to terrorists in conflict zones.
The attacks were planned abroad, and the order was given by other terrorists who are based in Syria, Iraq, and Libya to prove that they still exist. However, they failed to destabilize our security forces and plunged Tunisia into chaos.
Tunisian Premier Youssef Chahed signed a decree banning the niqab face cover at government buildings and public facilities. The Premier's advisors cited security reasons. Islamic scholars say the decision could cause unrest in the country.
The decision could divide the public opinion because Tunisia is a Muslim society. Those who reject the ban have all the legal and constitutional means to protest peacefully. Tunisia must remain united at this difficult period.
Tunisia has reinforced security on border regions with Libya and Algeria to prevent the illegal entry of Tunisian or foreign militants. Dozens of suspects were arrested in connection with the bombings on Habib Bourguiba Avenue. Thousands of policemen have been deployed across Tunisia to secure vital facilities, embassies, tourist sites and beach resorts. The head of state and the country's premier have called on Tunisians to trust their military and security institutions and to continue their daily activities normally during this state of emergency. Adnan Chauchi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's head to Algeria now, where protesters fill the streets on the 57th anniversary of the country's independence. CGTN's Ashtatel has more on their demands and President Abdelkader Ben Salah's call for a national dialogue.
Demonstrators fill the streets of Algiers on Algeria's Independence Day. They mark the country's 57th year of independence, not with celebrations, but with demands for new democratic leadership. The protests come after the interim government postponed the planned July 4th presidential elections. Interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah called for a national dialogue to restore confidence.
We are launching a path for dialogue which will be free and fully transparent. An independent electoral body, free from any party affiliations, will manage the process. This body will have the necessary qualifications to legitimately lead this dialogue.
On the streets, his call for dialogue received a mixed reaction, with some heeding the president's message.
Dialogue is a good thing. It's desirable, and the adoption of peace methods in political expression is necessary.
The road is still long for radical change. I believe that calling for a dialogue table, as called by President Saleh, without changing previous political faces is not a good solution.
Despite the resignation of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika on April 2nd, protesters continue to demand for members of the former regime to step down. Astatal, CGTN.
The World Food Programme has described the Democratic Republic of Congo as the world's second largest hunger crisis after Yemen. The UN agency says 13 million Congolese are food insecure. The crisis has been compounded by ethnic violence in the northeast, where thousands have been forced to flee their homes. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
Congolese displaced by ethnic violence adjust to a new life at a camp in Ituri province. Thousands of them fled their homes in Jugu territory after clashes broke out between the Hema and Lendu communities last month. Humanitarian agencies have scaled up their operations to support them.
We have more than 300,000 people displaced. There is a mix of intervention in terms of in-kind donations. So we are bringing commodity and food to the people. Also cash, so we give them cash to access product in the market.
The ethnic conflict in Ituri province has worsened the DRC's food insecurity. The World Food Programme says millions of people are struggling to get food across the country.
DRC represents worldwide the second largest crisis in the world. We have more than 13 million people that are food insecure, and you also may consider that more of 5.8 children and women are suffering from acute malnutrition in the country.
Local authorities say the conflict has claimed 160 lives. An official from President Tshisekedi's party says the government is doing all it can to improve the situation.
The president took his team up to Ituri. He went to Bunia and to other places in the region to reassure the people that his government is committed to bring about change. What kind of change? Improve the security situation in those places. And to do so, of course, you need to make sure that your own troops are well prepared to do the job.
President Tshisekedi described the ethnic conflict as attempted genocide and ordered a large-scale operation against the militias. The government hopes the restoration of peace will enable the displaced people to return to their homes to fend for themselves. Hundreds of people displaced by the ethnic conflict have fled to neighboring Uganda. The crisis has occurred as Ituri province struggles to contain the country's worst Ebola outbreak. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Uganda and China have begun an academic exchange program to boost vocational skills in the East African country. The project is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative and will include a huge expansion of oil and gas production. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Chinese and Uganda vocational trainers are meeting to discuss ways to meet the demand for 25,000 oil and gas workers. To meet an expected surge in demand in the Ugandan energy sector in the coming years.
Uganda is in partnership with the Chinese government to not only to prepare the human resource, but also to give us the practical experience. These people have been in this industry, oil and gas, for a very long time.
Uganda is preparing to commercialize oil and gas production by 2023. The government expects 75% of the jobs created to require technical skills, including welders, drivers, and electricians.
We have trained 30, for last year of that 3G certified trainers. Actually, now some of them they have in different areas. Some of them are working in some oil potential company contract. Some are working on some manufacturing company. Some even be trained as a trainer to train other people. That's what's it.
They will work on key infrastructure projects, including refineries and pipeline projects.
I really encourage companies to have those embedded trainings, so-called on-job training, and on-the-side training is very much needed.
Uganda has over 6.5 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. As Uganda warms up for its first oil drop in 4 years' time, it is hoped that such initiatives will help polish skills of young people who want to contribute towards the development of their country. Hilary Yesiga, CGTN, Kampala.
To international news now, and Iran will begin enriching uranium beyond a 3.67% cap set by a landmark nuclear deal in a few hours. A spokesperson for the country's Atomic Energy Organization said on television that the order received from President Hassan Rouhani would be implemented after all the technical details were sorted out. In a news conference, a senior Iranian official said Tehran would keep reducing its commitments to the deal every 60 days unless moves were made to protect it from American sanctions. They also said they were fully prepared to enrich any amount of uranium at any level, but suggested that the door was still open for talks. Well, since U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal last year, tensions have escalated. Recent events ranging from the shooting down of a drone to seizing an oil tanker have sparked fears of an all-out confrontation. Here's a look at what led to the crisis.
2 rounds of economic sanctions right after the U.S. withdrawal in 2018. In August, business transactions in dollars and gold were targeted, as well as autos, airlines, mining and agriculture. Then a bigger blow came in November, an agenda to pull the plug on an already crippled economy, a complete embargo on Iranian oil with no exemptions, and total isolation of Iran's finance industry. And this year, tensions have spread from the economic sector to the military arena. In April, the U.S. labeled Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a foreign terrorist organization. In June, Iran downed a U.S. military drone. The next day, President Trump tweeted that he had called off a retaliatory strike at the last minute. All of this is happening while Pentagon is sending warships, armed helicopters and troops to the Persian Gulf in thousands. Meanwhile, the EU is trying to keep Iran in the deal. Iran stopped following part of the deal in May. It gave the remaining signatories of the deal 60 days to come up with new terms before it quits the deal completely. The UK, Germany and France are leading an effort in establishing a new transaction channel to bypass US sanctions. But the goodwill was spiked when UK Marines detained an Iranian oil tanker on Thursday. Iran has previously said it is willing to reconsider taking the old terms under the 2015 deal if the 3 countries honor their commitment. But storm clouds are gathering as time is running out. Maka, CGTN.
Welcome to the World Today on CGTN.
Let's have a quick recap of the headlines this hour. African leaders have gathered in Niamey for an African Union summit that will launch the operational phase of a long-sought continental free trade zone. The trade deal got a boost earlier this week when Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari committed to signing the deal at the weekend. Sudan's Transitional Military Council and Opposition Alliance are due to finalize a power-sharing deal on Monday. Reaching an early agreement Friday, the two sides will establish a sovereign council, which will be the highest level of power in the country. The deal will see the two sides rotate control of this council for 3 years before holding elections. The authority will be under a military leader for the first 21 months before a civilian leader takes over for the final 18 months. Tunisia's Coast Guard has recovered the bodies of 14 migrants who drowned when their boat sank. Tunisia's Red Crescent believes their boat was carrying more than 80 people when it set sail from neighboring Libya. Meanwhile, dozens of migrants who were saved from a shipwreck in the Mediterranean by an Italian aid ship have been taken to Lampedusa Island. They disembarked in the early hours of Sunday. And Iran will begin enriching uranium beyond a 3.67% cap set by a landmark nuclear deal in a few hours. A spokesperson for the country's Atomic Energy Organization said live on state television that the order received from President Hassan Rouhani would be implemented after all the technical details were sorted out. In a news conference, a senior Iranian official said Tehran would keep reducing its commitments to the deal every 60 days unless moves were made to protect it from American sanctions. And that's a look at your headlines at this hour. Let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's ahead. Egypt increases fuel prices to promote economic reform. And Ethiopia to open mobile communication market to private investors.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Egyptian government has raised the prices of fuel and petroleum products for the 4th year in a row. The increase was between 16% and 30% depending on the fuel grade. Yasser Hakim has more details.
The government says it's reducing expenditure by cutting subsidies on energy. Experts say it's inevitable to balance the budget and narrow the deficit.
A third of the state budget was eaten up by energy subsidies, but starting 2015, the government took the brave decision to gradually reduce the subsidies. In 4 years, subsidies had dropped by 80%. This year alone, the energy subsidy has gone down by 40% compared to last year.
Although people were aware since last year that prices of fuel would increase this July, yet it has still caused dissatisfaction in the streets.
It's adding more burden on us. The prices of fuel have pushed the price of public transportation up and other commodities too.
It is not just transportation. When you go to buy anything now, the prices are higher, and they will tell you this is because the fuel prices have been increased.
A new mechanism has also been introduced in the high-end Octane 95 grade.
It's a committee that revises the fuel price every 3 months. The mechanism is based on 3 components: international oil prices, the import cost, and the dollar value as well as expenses.
The mechanism will be applied on all fuel grades in the near future. The oil price hikes has an inflationary effect on most products in the market, so the government has implemented a host of social welfare measures to relieve the burden of the low-income earners.
The government has raised funds for the Takaful and Karama social program for the poor. There has been a 20% salary increment, a 70% increase in minimum wage, and a 15% raise in pensions. These billions of pounds that cover the wage increases have been saved from the energy subsidies.
With these reforms, the government is targeting an economic growth of 6% in 2020, up from 5.2%. Officials say the money saved from the energy subsidy cuts will also be used to develop the outdated health and education sectors. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
To Somalia now, where a local bank has launched the latest World Elite MasterCard, the highest category of debit cards, as it seeks to tap into a rapidly changing business environment. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo tells us more from Mogadishu.
The latest launch by the International Bank of Somalia hopes to target growing financial needs in the country. The bank has partnered with MasterCard to provide its clients with World Elite, the highest category of MasterCard debit cards.
We had the privilege of being the first bank in East Africa, actually East and Central Africa, to roll out or to launch the World Elite MasterCard product, which is one of the most recent and one of the most advanced debit cards that MasterCard has launched most recently. And this is a product that is ideally meant for the high net worth, frequent travelers who require access to different benefits.
Through the launch, the bank hopes to target business community as well as the diaspora and foreigners operating in the country. In 2015, MasterCard made history by becoming the first international payment network to enter the Somalia market and has since allowed Somalis to access the global market through its various banking options.
With this debit card, then it enables you to access over 1,200 VIP airport lounges across the globe in over 120 countries. So it brings a wide variety of products. MasterCard estimate that a customer who subscribes to this kind of card ideally can end up saving up to $25,000 in a year, which is really huge.
The central bank has in recent months granted operating licenses to 5 new lenders in order to expand the country's relatively small banking industry. Estimates indicate that the financial sector is ranked as an underpenetrated market, with less than 3% of the entire country's population banked. In an increasing sign of economic recovery, leading Somali banks continue to partner with international payment networks like MasterCard and Visa, as more and more Somalis slowly embrace formal banking. For decades, many in the country and abroad were forced to use the informal means to send money back home. Annual remittance through the Hawala is estimated to be $1.2 to $2 billion per year, a sum larger than foreign aid, but with the introduction of banks, this is bound to change.
The uptake of banking has been quite robust. We've seen tremendous growth in terms of people embracing formal banking systems, accessing these products, which enable them basically now to become part of the global financial inclusion.
The opening of more banks has also helped address the unemployment rate among recent graduates. Experts now hope that the rapidly changing business environment will attract global banks to invest in the Horn of African nation. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The Ethiopian government is considering opening up the mobile telecommunication market to private investors. Currently, state-owned Ethio Telecom is the sole operator in the Horn of Africa nation. Steps to have private companies compete with the government-owned provider are part of reforms which were initiated by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Ahmed has promised to fully or partially privatize key government institutions like energy, the railway, sugar manufacturing, and telecommunications.
The key decision in terms of market structure is one, to separate telecom into 2 divisions, and second, to allow 2 additional operators. So the market structure generally would have what you call a 2+1 formula. Telecom would have 1 partner in terms of JV or selling its share, but there will be 2 additional operators who would be allowed to start a greenfield operation in Ethiopia. We plan to finalize the entire process of privatization and liberalization of the sector between now and the first quarter of 2020.
Meanwhile, the second edition of the International Forum for Entrepreneurial and Dynamic Women has concluded in the Ivorian capital, Abidjan. The event was an opportunity to reward women and organizations that stand out for women's entrepreneurial activities across the continent. Under the theme ICTs, a wealth of opportunity for women, this year's edition sought to create an interactive network to connect African businesswomen with other women around the world, economic empowerment and leadership in Africa through the use of ICT.
Through such forums, there are real solutions to propose and also the will to establish a support network for women. We have to help women improve their skills. If men have more results than women, it is not by chance. Women must therefore be taught to work and given the tools that will transform their business activities through digital technology.
As you know, today we can do anything using ICTs. Women can sell products on the internet and succeed. The internet is a good way to start a business. You must never rely on someone else, but rather on yourself, on your own values to succeed in life.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. A South African artist showcases unique art to address land issues.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In South Africa, artist Themba Khumalo is showcasing his unique art during his first formal solo exhibition in Johannesburg. Khumalo is best known for his evocative etchings that capture the cityscape and landscapes of Johannesburg. But this current exhibition is dealing with the emotive issue of land. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela.
The visual arts in South Africa have always been perceived as elitist and a specialist undertaking because of the association with affluence and power. But over the past few years, that has been changing and there's a lot of diversification in this field. Themba Khumalo is one of those who are magnifying the art world to a non-traditional base. In this exhibition, he explores the issue of the return of the land to its rightful owners.
I started doing this body of work from last year when my work is mostly based on land in terms of land, people taking back their land. It talks about social issues, poverty, and the use of land, actually. So what you found is more, sometimes I talk about spiritual from people, like in terms of hope and all that. So it talks about what's happening now in terms of social ills and political and stuff. So then I'll use the color, the coffee, is inspired by the soil. So hence you see most of my works also like this brown and there's clouds and all that. So clouds are inspired by in terms of emotions, because the only way to capture emotions I use clouds. For it's easier to say you can get the mood of an artwork.
Khumalo has always had an affinity for art. He explores place and the idea of home through his pieces. In his work, he also navigates the use of different mediums, including charcoal drawings and painting. He makes use of techniques such as etching, dry point, and monoprint because he says he can achieve strong, intense lines, different effects, and textures. He talks us through his process of painting a picture.
Mostly when I start, I'll start with coffee. So I'll paint the brown first, let it dry. So it's more like layering, because the first paint of coffee is like get the lightest. For you to get the darkest, you have to like paint on top to become darker. So I'll start with the browns, let it dry, then I'll come with charcoal on top. That's how it works. So I'll work with fixative as well. So it's more like a build-up. So you, from dark to light. So most of the time then I'll use, for the white especially, so I'll use a rubber. So it's more like taking out as well. So yeah, so it's more like a build-up, or start with the browns, then end up with the darks.
Presenting this exhibition is a proud moment for him.
My last show, it was 2016. So I was like, I ended up graduating at Artist Proof. So this is like my other show, because it's been 2 years now, not having a show in Joburg. So for me, it's very important, and shows growth, because I've recently went to Germany for residency. It's one of my big shows, so it's really, I'm very nervous, because it's been a while since I had a show in Joburg. So people have seen my prints, but not really like a solo exhibition. So yeah, I'm very excited about this for sure.
The exhibition is being showcased at Gallery 2 in Johannesburg. Yodisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Iraq is celebrating the UNESCO World Heritage Committee's decision to name the historic city of Babylon a World Heritage Site. The decision was made through a voting process that took place in Azerbaijan's capital, Baku. This comes years after Baghdad began campaigning for the site to be added to the list. The city on the Euphrates River is about 85 kilometers south of Baghdad. It was once a main tourist attraction before Iraq suffered one war after another in the past 4 decades. Babylon is about 4,300 years old and is now mainly an archaeological ruin. It also has important museums where dynasties have risen and fallen since the earliest days of settled human civilization. Dozens of Iraqis waving their national flag have gathered at the site to celebrate their city's new international status.
We have the ambition to see Babylon more beautiful through the focusing of funding, financing the infrastructure and archaeology restoration. All this will help Babylon to be like we see it and as it used to be in the past. Babylon is one of the nicest cities in the world.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South Africa's Bafana Bafana through to the quarterfinals of the Africa Cup of Nations with a stunning win over Egypt.